I think we might be live. Possibly. I'm starting a little earlier because I am just bored enough. And also because of things going on this evening in politics. I am going to try and do this, and then I've got to record tomorrow's video straight after. Hopefully we are on the correct channel. So yeah, good evening everyone. Welcome to another PMQ response. This should be amazing. Before we do that though, I am going to address the obvious elephant in the room, and that is Theresa May's statement, a statement she gave about an hour ago. It should be short. It's on the state of Brexit and where we're going. Things we now know. We already knew, in fact. But we may as well get this out of the way now because it brings up some interesting little talking points that I think are worth investing a little time into. So, here we go. Make sure I can see the chat. Hello Denny, Ash, Stargazer, Joe, and Peter. Oh, and have we left yet? And Beechan. Hope you're all doing well. So, this is a statement from, well, not long ago actually. Where's the audio?
Nearly 3 years have passed since the public voted to leave the European Union. It was the biggest democratic exercise in our country's history. I came to office on a promise to deliver on that verdict. In March 2017, I triggered the Article 50 process for the UK to exit the EU, and Parliament supported it overwhelmingly. 2 years on, MPs have been unable to agree on a way to implement the UK's withdrawal.
That's because the majority of MPs want to remain. Therefore, to conceive of an option where we leave goes against what they believe. Now yes, while you have repeatedly brought your idea forward, more people have started to vote for it. It is still a case that either because of their beliefs or party politics, or because your deal's trash, which it is, people are voting against it, and unfortunately there is not an actual majority that gets through the Commons. There are people who have put amendments forward for things like a people's vote, a second referendum, revoking Article 50, all of which have been summarily rejected. Therefore, any idea that is continually touted by, for example, Jeremy Corbyn is redundant, because his idea doesn't command a majority either. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Hello, Niklaus.
As a result, we will now not leave on time with a deal on the 29th of March.
Imagine our shock.
This delay is a matter of great personal regret for me.
Well, you were arrogant enough to think you could get your deal through Parliament, even though most of us know it would never have gotten through Parliament. Not because the deal's trash. That's just a handy little addition. It's also because, again, MPs don't want to leave.
And of this I am absolutely sure. You, the public, have had enough.
Yep.
You're tired of the infighting. You're tired of the political games and the arcane procedural rows.
Not the arcane part. I quite enjoy that. The part that has bugged me the most has been the obvious displays of party politics and the inconsistency from MPs that will say they have a solution but not show a solution, that will continually call for general elections, votes of no confidence, lose them but still try and hold the moral high ground. It is increasingly harder for someone like me, who should ordinarily be a Labour voter because of my background, to ever consider voting for Labour considering the party they are at this present time. It is an absolute joke.
Tired of MPs talking about nothing else but Brexit.
And themselves.
When you have real concerns about our children's schools, our National Health Service, knife crime.
In ascending order.
You want this stage of the Brexit process to be over and done with. I agree. I am on your side. It is now time for MPs to decide.
Ugh.
So today I have written to Donald Tusk,
We will get to that letter soon.
President of the European Council, to request a short extension of Article 50 up to the 30th of June to give MPs the time to make a final choice.
Rather interestingly, Donald Tusk did issue a statement on it, and we will get to it as well, because there's a video for it. Serene, you owe no apology. I started early.
Do they want to leave the EU with a deal which delivers on the result of the referendum, that takes back control of our money, borders and laws, while protecting jobs and our national security?
She's phrased this incorrectly, in the sense that it would protect to an extent. It would, at best, lessen the damage of what no deal would do in the short term, potentially. And of course, it does damage by comparison to remaining within the pet project. Sorry, the EU. So it is incorrectly stated by Theresa May. I don't support her deal, because her deal is vague. Without specifics, it is not a deal. It's like giving someone a blank piece of paper and signing it and saying, that's the deal. That's basically it. Because we don't know what's on the paper. It is open to interpretation.
Do they want to leave without a deal? Or do they not want to leave at all?
Well, a lot of people want no deal. More people want to agree a deal. Even more people want a people's vote or second referendum, because it's an option that should be explored. And a nice little corner, a Scottish corner, predominantly, want to revoke Article 50 entirely.
Causing potentially irreparable damage to public trust, not just
And our democracy.
in this generation of politicians, but to our entire democratic process. It is high time we made a decision.
Here's the decision. We voted to leave, therefore we leave. And I stand by this. On March 29th, if there is no deal, then we leave without a deal. Since the only deal on the table is yours, it is either that or revoking Article 50. Those are your only two realistic options. And as you won't revoke Article 50 because that would be anti-democratic, I think no deal is the more reasonable option, because your deal's trash. I don't know how many more times I can say that, but let's face it, it is trash.
So far, Parliament has done everything possible to avoid making a choice.
Point in chat from Megazeus, although Sean, yes, turd reached peak polish. There is a belief, because... Wow, that's loud. My apologies. In the... what was it? Oh yes, so Tusk is currently in the process of convincing leaders to grant this extension. The problem is, if one nation, only one, says no, or vetoes it, like Salvini, then of course no deal happens anyway. Just because you've written to Donald Tusk does not mean Donald Tusk could in fact make anything happen. The European Council could in fact veto it. and we crash out. By, well, using the term you guys use, not me.
Motion after motion and amendment after amendment has been tabled without Parliament ever deciding what it wants. All MPs have been willing to say is what they do not want. I passionately hope.
That's because, do you remember that joint agreement you signed? That the government would come up with all the solutions? Yeah, MPs, certainly those not within your party, don't have to come up with solutions. They just have to poke holes in your ideas and then fuck with you because it's funny.
MPs will find a way to back the deal I've negotiated with the...
Is my microphone picking up my breathing? I do apologise. I don't think I qualify as fat, though. Congested, perhaps.
EU. A deal that delivers on the result of the referendum and is the very best deal negotiable. And I will continue to work night and day to secure the support of my colleagues, the DUP, and others for this deal.
But your deal has been rejected twice, and when it was offered up for a third time, not without being changed in the slightest. The Speaker of the House used his own parliamentary power to reject you presenting it on the grounds that it was not different, and much like the thumbnail to this stream, repeating the same thing expecting a different result is insanity. Oh dear God.
But I am not prepared to delay Brexit any further than the 30th of June. Some argue that I'm making the wrong choice, and I should ask for a longer extension to the end of the year or beyond, to give more time for politicians to argue over the way forward. That would mean asking you to vote in European elections nearly 3 years after our country decided to leave. What kind of message would
I'll let her finish
that send?
I would point out that the majority of British people, citizens, don't even know who their MEPs are, and we'll get to them as well because they've also written a letter.
And just how bitter and divisive would that election campaign be, at a time when the country desperately needs bringing back together? Some have suggested holding a second referendum. I don't believe that's what you want, and it is not what I want. We asked you the question already, and you gave us your answer. Now, you want us to get on with it, and that is what I am determined to do.
Oh, how very intimidating. 1 second. I'm gonna switch back here a second. So as I mentioned, there was... if I close that, because I don't need it anymore. There was a letter. A number of letters, and we're going to get to those. Right. I need to pull the chat up again. Learn to spell congestion, Denny. So, this is the letter, well, the first page of it, that Theresa May sent to Donald Tusk. So, the UK government's policy remains to leave the EU in an orderly manner on the basis of the withdrawal agreement and political declaration agreed in November, complemented by the joint instrument and supplement to the political declaration President Juncker and I agreed on in March the 11th, on 11th of March. You'll be aware that before the House of Commons rejected the deal for a second time on the 12th of March, I warned in a speech in Grimsby, Haiti basically, that the consequences of failing to endorse the deal were unpredictable and potentially deeply unpalatable. The House of Commons did not vote in favour of the deal. The following day it voted against leaving the EU without a negotiated deal, no deal essentially off the table. The day after that, it supported a government motion that proposed a short extension to Article 50 if the House supported a meaningful vote before the week's European Council. The motion also made clear that if this had not happened, a longer extension would oblige the UK to call elections to the European Parliament. Dear, dear. I do not believe that it would be in either of our interests for the UK to hold European Parliament elections. I had intended to bring the House back to the House of Commons this week. The Speaker of the House of Commons said on Monday that in order for a further meaningful vote to be brought back to the House of Commons, the agreement would have to be fundamentally different. Not different in terms of wording, but different in terms of substance. Some MPs have interpreted that this means a further change to the deal. This position has made it impossible in practice to call a further vote in advance of the European Council, which is happening... Is it today or tomorrow? Where am I? Yes, the position made it impossible to Council. However, it remains my intention to bring the deal back to the House. In advance of that vote... Peter Edwards, cheer up a bit, Omegon. I'm a miserable bastard at the moment. I do apologise. In advance of that vote, I'd be grateful if the European Council could therefore approve the supplementary documents that President Juncker and I agreed in Strasbourg, putting the government in a position to bring these agreements to the House and confirming the changes to the government's proposition to Parliament. I also intend to bring forward further domestic proposals that confirm my previous commitments to protect our internal market, given the concerns expressed about the backstop. Thank you, Sir Blue-Footed Booby. On this basis, and in the light of the outcome of the European Council, I intend to put forward a motion as soon as possible under Section 13 of the Withdrawal Act 2018, and make the argument for the orderly withdrawal and strong future partnership the UK economy, its citizens' security and the continent's future demands. If the motion is passed, I am confident that Parliament will proceed to ratify the deal constructively. I'm going to end it there because honestly I can't be asked anymore. Are you coming down with gripe? Right. So there was something else. Oh no, that's something else for later. This was written by an MEP who I've never heard of. But this is another support. A letter of support by an MEP. Number of them, in fact, at the bottom here, indicating that they support the Prime Minister in requesting an extension. So now we have Donald Tusk. We have a video here.
Donald Tusk of the European Council will make a short statement on Brexit. After the statement,
I just want to be clear, I haven't actually bothered to find out if he speaks English in this.
He will unfortunately not be able with the President.
Yes.
Please, President,
I promise
you have the floor.
Oh, okay, we got English.
Today I received a letter from Prime Minister May in which she addresses the European Council with two requests. To approve the so-called Strasbourg Agreement between the UK and the European Commission, and to extend the Article 50 period until the 30th of June 2019. Just now I had a phone call with Prime Minister May about these proposals. In the light of the consultations that I have conducted over the past days, I believe that a short extension will be possible, but it will be conditional on a positive vote on the withdrawal agreement in the House of Commons.
So the deal has to be voted on first. That's the condition. That's the part everyone needs to know about. So we can go back here now. These are all linked below if you want to watch the full thing, but quite frankly I can't be asked to look at his hairline. It just bugs me. What we'll do, I love people who ban shows me where they stand. Right, good luck with that, Denny. I think, as far as I'm concerned, I don't agree with the deal. I don't like it. It's not very good. I like that Theresa May is trying to flex her muscles, but at the same time it's very interesting to see Tusk say, okay, we can give you this if you sweeten the deal first. So, now that I've gotten that out of the way, it's relevant to an extent. And we should now actually start PMQs, because seriously, 20 minutes on this already. I'm sorry about that, by the way.
Questions to the Prime Minister. Mr. Andrew Rosindell.
Question 1, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Before she does that, to Serene, Tusk can't. He's head of the European Council. He gets the countries at the European Council to agree to the extension. They do that. It then gets made, ratified and legislated or something. But it has to be done on both sides, I believe. And both UKs, yeah, resign. Some believe that she will resign anyway, because that's how she's going to get her deal across the line. And it is a slave contract, pretty much. Wait, what? I'm not banning people.
Mr. Speaker, today is the centenary of the Qualification of Women Act, where...
Yeah, virtue. Let's skip ahead a little. My apologies, but there's a lot of virtue in this.
What drives me in politics has always been a love of country and a passionate belief in our United Kingdom. And so I have to tell the Prime Minister that I agree with the people of Romford, who are deeply unhappy by the proposed...
Wait. Fuck's sake. 1 second. This is silly. Give me a second. I love that the YouTube filter has just pulled me on the wrong thing. You absolute retards.
Question.
Perfect. Right. My apologies. I know why, because it had the wrong guy at the start. There's about like a minute's worth of virtue here with regards to Christchurch, the Netherlands, some cyclone tornado crap as well. And I know there's a very angry Scotsman who asked the question first. I really want to hear it, because I unfortunately wasn't available to listen to this guy's question. Chat, where are you? Oh, there we go. Just ignore the troll. There's a troll in my chat, is there? Okay, well that probably would explain why at the start there was a bunch of very... yeah, I can't really repeat what he wrote.
Can I totally associate myself with everything the Prime Minister has said? We will never allow hate to succeed, and we do stand in solidarity with the victims of Cyclone Edie. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's deal lies in tatters. Her cabinet is in open revolt. She presides over the biggest constitutional crisis this nation has experienced. And where leadership is required, she has once again cravenly caved in to her hard Brexiteers and will now only seek a short extension to Article 50, contrary to the expressed will of this House. When will she develop a backbone and stand up to those that would take this nation to disaster? And as one of her ministers said this morning, referencing another feeble Prime Minister, weak, weak, weak.
Before she answers, I would love him to specify which MPs he in particular is targeting, because him being SNP, he wants to revoke Article 50. So you would surmise he's not referring to the backbone-less Labour Party, he's referring to the hardline Brexiteer Conservatives. You would think he'd at least have the decency to just say that. I find it fascinating that a unionist is so keen, a nationalist is so anti-unionist and unironically pro-unionist at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps it would be helpful in response to that question if I update the House on the forthcoming European Council and the issue of Article 50 extension. On Thursday, the House voted in favour of a short extension if the House had supported a meaningful vote before this week's European Council. The motion also made it clear that a longer extension would oblige the United Kingdom to hold elections to the European Parliament. Mr. Speaker, I do not believe such elections would be in anyone's interests.
It would be a bit of an insult, really, wouldn't it, for us to take up, you know, spaces within the EU's Parliament that should be reserved for other people, and they wouldn't be long-term jobs either. So what's the point? Other than a really good expenses wallet, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to be doing anything to contribute towards well, European politics. And her omnipresent giant anal beads appear to be missing, although Penny Mordaunt over here on the left, maybe they qualify this time round. Who knows?
The idea that 3 years after voting to leave the EU, the people of this country should be asked to elect a new set of MEPs is, I believe, unacceptable. It will be a failure to deliver on the referendum decision that this House said it would honour.
Oh, and Colourful Gem, feel better, please.
Order, the long way to go, and what the Prime Minister is saying must be heard. The Prime Minister.
I have therefore this morning written to President Tusk, the President of the European Council, informing him that the UK seeks an extension to the Article 50 period until the 30th of June. Copies of the letter are being placed in the libraries of the House. The government intends to bring forward proposals for a third meaningful vote. If that vote is passed, the extension will give the House time to consider the withdrawal agreement bill. If not, the House will have to decide how to proceed.
Interesting to note there that Tusk said, later on obviously, that the withdrawal agreement has to be approved. Therefore I was wrong when I mentioned the deal, meaning that she's doing it on the assumption that the deal has to get through first, before the withdrawal agreement. That is very interesting. I'm sure her opinion changed afterwards.
But as Prime Minister, I am not prepared to delay Brexit any further than the 30th of June.
Those that are chuntering, let's go with that, heckling, I find it fascinating that they are, because in this instance she's quite right. Delaying it any further would mean getting involved in elections we don't have to be a part of, although we don't really have to select anyone for it, to be honest. Delaying it any further doesn't change what's going to happen. There are only 3 options on the table. Deal, no deal, revoke. You can rule out no deal, but you can't actually prevent it. You can keep voting against the deal, but then you're only left with revoke or no deal. Just because Parliament is against the deal, revoking, kind of, and no deal, doesn't mean you can avoid any of them. In fact, you can only avoid one of them, and that's the deal, by continually voting against it.
Prime Minister welcome Oil and Gas UK's report today predicting 200 billion of new investment in the sector, supported by this government's fiscal policy, in direct contrast to the SNP failure to stimulate the Scottish economy.
Don't you just love a planted question? Because it's innocuous, changes the subject obviously from Brexit, which is going to be the focal point, and gives the Tories a good chance to just rail on the SNP for sucking.
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that the Chancellor's spring statement last week showed that this is indeed a government that is delivering for Scotland. He mentions the issue of fiscal policy and oil and gas. We've also put £260 million for the Borderlands growth deal, 68 million extra in Barnet consequentials for the Scottish Government, 79 million for a new national supercomputer at Edinburgh University. While the SNP is obsessed with independence, it's this Conservative government that is focused on growing Scotland's economy.
To be fair, Scotland is doing a good job growing its economy by increasing the tax rate to the point where it's higher than it is in the rest of the UK, because they're special.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Green tea for the win, everyone.
I want to start by sending my condolences to all the families and friends of victims of the terror attack in New Zealand last week. The terrible events in Christchurch should remind us all there is no...
the virtue, fuck off.
Deepest sympathies to all those and Malawi. I support the government in sending £6 million of aid. I hope if more aid is required, we will be able to respond urgently and generously to any demand for help from people that are so desperate.
I know he's doing virtue and everything, but I thought I'd pause for a second because it pisses me off. And Prospero, yes, you're quite right with the sarcasm. High taxes always stimulate an economy, just like quantitative easing, because that just makes people want to spend money. You know, seeing paper money on the floor. If we wanted to do that, why don't we just go raid everyone's Monopoly box?
Suffering at the present time. Mr. Speaker, we're now in the midst of a full-scale national crisis. Incompetence, failure and intransigence from the Prime Minister and her government have brought us to this point. Parliament has rejected her deal. It's rejected no deal. The Prime Minister now has no plan. In an effort to break the deadlock, I've held meetings with members all across the House.
Before he continues, thank you, Prospero, for doing that. That's very kind of you.
I'm having further meetings today.
Oh, you know, actually, the comment he just made, further meetings today. So, and this is quite amusing. He's reaching out to talk to any and all MPs, right? To speak with them and agree a deal. He's trying, and I'll give him credit for that. But earlier today, he left a meeting because he refused to get involved. Because Chuka Umunna, who is the leader of the independent group, those MPs that have left Labour and the Conservatives, was in the room. He was invited. And Jeremy Corbyn said he's not a real party leader and left. So somebody who is preaching now tolerance and wants to talk to everyone refuses to talk to somebody because he doesn't consider them a legitimate party leader, but he has 8 members, I think 8 or 10 people within his group now. The fact is that party is going to grow because you're not addressing their existence, and their votes are very much important. Therefore, you walking out and pouting while claiming to be open to talking to everyone, let's face it, you were willing to sit down with Hamas and Hezbollah without any preconditions. But Chuka Umunna, no, I can't sit down with that guy because, you know, he's a traitor to Labour. On one hand, we have to address why they left the party in the first place, which is something he did say, and then he, in the same interview, said those very MPs that left need to stand for by-elections. Your ability to perceive, deduce and act is astonishing. I'm starting to see why at 70 or whatever it is you are now, people are questioning your intellectual capacity.
To find a compromise that supports jobs and living standards. Tomorrow, I'm meeting EU Prime Ministers and officials in Brussels. This, Mr. Speaker, is a national crisis. Will the Prime Minister meet me today to discuss our proposals as a way forward to get out of this crisis?
I will say, I actually think this is a good idea. However, I would point out, Theresa May invited him to number 10 to do just that before the meaningful vote happened, the first one. And he wouldn't turn up unless no deal was taken off the table. He set preconditions and now he is trying to take the moral high ground. Seriously. What leg do you actually have to stand on? The answer, by the way, is none. You don't have one. It's embarrassing.
To the right honourable gentleman, it's a bit rich him standing up and inviting me to meet him. When for days and days he refused to meet me, and when for days and days he refused to meet me, and he then refused to allow the shadow Brexit secretary to have a further meeting with the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Of course, I'm always happy to meet members across this House to discuss the issue of Europe, but I do note that opposition party leaders, when they came out from the meeting with the leader of the opposition, made it clear that what they didn't want was Brexit. We should be delivering Brexit for the people of this country.
It's also important to note that those same leaders that sat down with Theresa May said that they couldn't agree a deal with her. It's almost as if no one is capable of coming to terms and doing the one thing that was voted on, because the majority of those in that room don't support it. You are fighting against the people. The people will win. Kind of. Ish. Maybe.
Jeremy Corbyn!
I'm not sure there was an answer to my question there, actually, Mr. Speaker.
There wasn't.
I wanted no deal taken off the table. The House has taken no deal off the table.
No, they haven't. You're a retard if you want to keep pushing that. You can't take something off the table if it is an inevitability when the only other options can't happen. If you have no deal, then no deal happens. Unless you cancel this entirely, which you can't do, and Horny Hippos is quite right. Prime Ministers, for the most part, don't do answers, because it's easier to fuck with you. And it's one of those weird things where if you are the opposition, your job is to obviously poke holes. But if your questions lack integrity, people are going to notice it. I noticed on Twitter, the majority of people said Jeremy Corbyn destroyed May. I would argue other MPs throughout this PMQ did a better job, because when it came to this question, the first one, you did not have the moral high ground to make such claims or requests, because you turned down the chances to sit with her. What does that say about you, other than you are a man that lacks conviction and is entirely driven by party politics?
It's time the Prime Minister took no deal off the table.
She can't.
Mr. Speaker, the CBI said the extension vote is a welcome dose of common sense. Put in place a new process, drop the red lines. Every MP must show leadership through compromise.
I've just got... Okay, there's two things with this already that bug me. Drop the red lines. This term, red lines, it was used throughout the negotiating period. It was used so that we knew the government wasn't going to budge on certain things. We should not be the ones making all the compromises to the EU. Not only does that legitimise them, but it makes them the big bad, the boogeyman, the powerful. We should always have lines. Things we will not bend on. And there are things the EU have that we shouldn't bend on. We shouldn't waver or ignore. Workers' rights, I totally agree with the EU's. The Work Time Directive to an extent. There are things I agree with that the EU have that we should enshrine in our law. Therefore we shouldn't bend, we should merely adopt. It's not rocket science here. The red lines, it was a turn of phrase used to describe where we wouldn't budge during the negotiating period. That's it. And when you said MPs need to learn to compromise, I disagree. Because you've seen the deal. And you've seen how much we've compromised, to the point where I don't believe we could actually trade internationally with the deal that Theresa May brought forward. Because it is basically membership in anything, in all but name. Which I think is a bit lame. Hello to Daniela in the chat. And I'm glad Colourful Jamie got tea. Hopefully your discomfort will abate.
Will the Prime Minister drop the red lines? Is she prepared to compromise to get through this crisis?
The right honourable gentleman talks about decisions that have been taken by this House. I'm sure it won't have passed you by, Mr. Speaker, that of course this House has voted on and rejected a second referendum. It has voted on and rejected no deal. It has voted on and rejected Labour's deal. It has voted on and rejected a customs union.
all of these were covered in amendments from previous streams. It is sad that the same amendments were repeatedly brought forward, like Theresa May's deal. These amendments were trash. I'm sorry, they were all summarily rejected with a rather significant margin. The one that makes me chuckle the most is that when Jeremy Corbyn called for a people's vote, it was only half an hour earlier that the SNP had tabled amendment, and it was destroyed because Labour abstained from the vote, and the amendment was for a people's vote. I think Theresa mentions it soon as well. I probably shouldn't have said that. Spoilers, everyone.
And it has voted on and supported leaving with a deal. It's time this Parliament faced the consequences.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, the last time the Prime Minister tried her meaningful vote, she only managed 242 votes, slightly up on the previous attempt, but nevertheless a decisive rejection. Our plan received 296 votes, rather
still rejected.
Considerably more than that.
It doesn't mean your deal would get through, though. It was also rejected. I know that yours is a better one, but this isn't a dick measuring contest on feeble deals that don't actually do anything to benefit the country. You claim to want to protect jobs and everything else because you want to keep things the same. The country has decided they don't give a fuck about that. They want out. Therefore, you have to move from your own red lines, where you are holding things to a certain standard and refusing to bend on it.
Mr. Speaker, her government is in chaos. She's ignored the House, ignored trade unions, ignored businesses, and ignored the concerns of communities all around the country. She told the House that the EU would only allow an extension of Article 50 if there was a clear purpose. She's travelling to Brussels tomorrow morning to meet the EU summit leaders. What is her clear purpose?
I think if the right honourable gentleman had listened to the answer I gave to the first question that was posed in PMQs, he would have heard that.
Extension.
Well, it wasn't clear
And no, Denny, I will not ban Ash. Ash is my friend.
at all, Mr. Speaker, other than she's going to try again with what we'll now term MV3. Surely, after two big rejections by the House, she must have noticed there isn't much support for the deal that she negotiated.
But if you had noticed, even though it is insanity to continually bring it forward, more MPs were starting to side with her, which is, I think, what the plan was. Beat the MPs down to the point where they get ever so slightly more depressed and just agree to it anyway. Of course, many have said that she might, and no, there are no honourable members left. I forgot what I was going to say, never mind.
So we learned this morning, Mr. Speaker, that she's only going to ask for a short extension, which directly contradicts what the Cabinet Office Minister told the House, saying in the absence of a deal, seeking such a short and critically one-off extension would be downright reckless and completely at odds with the position this House adopted only last night. So who is downright reckless here, Mr. Speaker? The Prime Minister ploughing on with an unachievable, unsupported deal, or others in this House who want to achieve something serious and sensible to prevent the damage to the British economy, jobs and living standards all over this country?
You can't argue this. This is stupid. We voted leave. We knew that that would happen. There'll be damage to the economy, to employment. We know this. You cannot continue to argue this position, because while you MPs think you're doing what's best for the people, those that are opposed to Theresa May's deal, and I'm against it as well, but not in favour of Corbyn, his solution is a comprehensive customs union, which was voted against. Remaining in the single market, voted against not just by MPs, but also by the EU, who said you cannot cherry-pick which parts of membership of the EU you can actually have. You then recommended Norway++, which was also rejected. Yes, Tusk or Barnier said that it could and has the most potential, but even he said that that didn't actually, he was just fucking with people. He was just saying it to twist the knife in Theresa May. And that idea was summarily rejected by MPs as well. You cannot keep doing this. It's stupid. Oh, we MPs know what's best for the people. But those same people voted against what you're trying to do. I have a strange feeling while the SNP are more open about it, in the sense they want to revoke Article 50, you are trying to revoke Article 50 a different way. Because the only way you'll get what you want, which is to protect everything without changing it, because you're a socialist and stagnant as fuck. I mean, progressive, sorry. Key difference, of course. Where's my sarcasm sign? You don't represent the people, because the people voted in the opposite way to what you're trying to achieve. You need to understand this, learn it, and do something about it. Either change the people's mind, which you won't be able to do, or you do what the people voted for you to do. Regressive, I know. I was being cute for the fun of it.
The Right Honourable Gentleman talks about trying to achieve something sensible. It's the Right Honourable Gentleman who last week abstained on a vote of a second referendum, despite the fact that it's Labour Party policy, and then had the nerve to stand up in this House and say he reiterated their support for a second referendum. He has no idea what he wants on the future of this issue. He asks about a long extension. He asks about a long extension. I'm opposed to a long extension. I don't want a long extension. Setting aside the issue that a long extension would mean we would have to hold the European parliamentary elections, which I don't think is in anybody's interests. The outcome of a long extension would be endless hours and days of this House carrying on contemplating its navel on Europe and failing to address the issues that matter to our constituents. Their schools...
Order. The answer from the Prime Minister must be heard.
Order.
And everybody
Order.
else will be heard. The Prime Minister.
The outcome of a long extension would be this House spending yet more endless hours contemplating its navel on Europe and failing to address the issues that matter to our constituents, schools and hospitals and security and jobs. This House has indulged itself on Europe for too long.
I 100% agree with this already at this point in time. And Leslie's quite right. It would be a very, not fun classes at all.
Order. There's a lot of very noisy barracking. Order. The Prime Minister's reply will be heard, and colleagues know that I am happy for the exchanges to take place for as long as is necessary to ensure that they are orderly. The Prime Minister.
It's time for this House to determine that it will deliver on Brexit for the British people. That's what the British people deserve. They deserve better than this House has given them so far.
That's because that House thinks it's better than the rest of the country, and specifically England, since it was basically England that decided that Scotland and London especially were wrong.
Mr. Speaker, to describe the parliamentary process as one of indulgence doesn't show much respect.
No. She wasn't referring to parliamentary process. She was referring to the endless, pointless debates. And I've watched tens of hours of this crap. It's the same arguments repeated. It basically, the Brexit debates, draw a circle. And in that circle, just put a snake head on one part of it, okay? And then in the middle of the circle, just write every single vegan debate. Oh, and Brexit. Because they are one of the same. They go round and round and round. It's just a shame it's not like bibbing, really, isn't it? And if no one knows what that is, YouTube it. Supernatural bibbing. Because at least then I know when you've eaten yourself, you just go back to purgatory.
For democratic process that sent us here in the first place. The House, Mr. Speaker, has twice rejected the Prime Minister's deal. She's trying to come back for another attempt on Monday. Further to your ruling last Monday, she's got to come up with something a bit different than she's come up with so far. So what significant changes will there be, either to the withdrawal agreement or the political declaration, that will even allow the Prime Minister to table it on Monday?
I can answer this one. See, previously she had been using Mr. Sheen to polish the turd. What I've discovered is, with things that need to be polished to a higher standard, you use beeswax polish. It's far better. It will make that turd sparkle. It will look like something pooped by Roger. It will look glorious. That will stand a greater chance of getting through Parliament when they see all the sparkles on that turd.
The right honourable gentleman...
Before Theresa May answers it, Daniela Sarr, what would be the best outcome for the UK? No deal. Well, the best outcome is staying in the EU, actually, but no deal. And there was another comment I saw that was interesting. Oh, the paper fiddler. He's coming. I promise. Well, he probably will be when he touches that paper.
Talks about respect for democracy. Respect for democracy means that this House should deliver the Brexit that the British people voted for. And the right honourable gentleman now wants to disrespect democracy by holding a second referendum. It is not this government that is being disrespectful of the British people. It is the right honourable gentleman and his Labour Party.
There is a certain level of delusion that comes with it. You can say you're not disrespecting democracy, but you are saying you are open to the idea of a people's vote or a second referendum. As they are not the same thing, it's important to distinguish them. That is arrogant, to think that the people would want that, because you think it's fair to go back to them again with the same thing and say, try again. We are not Ireland. We are not the kind of nation that buckles until you get the result you want.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Job of Parliament is to...
And you're quite right, Serena. It's quite rich coming from Theresa May.
Hold government to account, and the Prime Minister doesn't seem to understand that.
I would point out she was held to account when she had the vote of no confidence, and she won. Something which you've never won.
She was first defeated, she promised legally binding changes.
She got
I haven't
them.
seen those legally binding changes.
She did actually get the legally binding changes to the backstop. So that tells me you aren't paying attention. You're not reading, because you're too busy on your allotment, making jam and chutney.
All she's doing is running down the clock after a second heavy defeat. Today, Mr. Speaker, marks 1,000 days since the referendum. And this government has led the country and themselves into crisis, chaos and division. We are still legally due to leave the European Union in 9 days' time. Months of running down the clock and a concerted campaign of blackmail, bullying and bribery has failed to convince the House, or the country, that her deal is anything but a damaging national failure and should be rejected. They've run out of time. They've run out of ideas. People, Mr. Speaker, all over this country are anxious and frustrated with this government's utter inability to find a way through the crisis. If the Prime Minister cannot get changes to her deal, will she give the people a chance to reject the deal and change the government?
Right. I'm going to address a few things in the comments first. Serene, will there be a meaningful vote on Monday? Possibly. She has to change the deal first. Living the dream, ew chutney. Might I recommend you try a mango chutney? It is quite delicious. Daniela Sa, wow, he can count. No, he can read. As everything he says is on paper. You notice he never looks at the person he's talking to. He never does it, because he can't. He reads from a script. That's why he never has any witty comebacks. If those are defeats, what win does Comrade Corbyn have? That he's still alive. And, Ray, hello Ray. What's Jezza on about? Fuck knows. Seriously, I have no idea. Yeah.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, I think he's actually just made the point that I was making in my previous answer to him, that he doesn't want to actually respect the vote that took place in the referendum in 2016. We have a deal. We have a deal that keeps millions of livelihoods safe and secure. It protects the Union for the future. It means murderers and rapists on the run can be brought back quickly to face justice in this country. No deal won't do that. The deal is good for this country. It delivers Brexit and it should be supported.
It really shouldn't, it's trash. It's the final countdown. I like that song, by the way, TC. When I was a kid, that was one of my favourite songs. No, we're going to go to the Paper Fiddler. Let's get to the Paper Fiddler. Right, here we go. Paper Fiddler, everyone. I hope those that are here solely to watch this pudgy, balding fuck fiddle some paper are ready.
We must work collectively together to drive hate out of our societies across the globe, and our thoughts are very much with the people of Mozambique, with Zimbabwe and those from Malawi, and we must do all we can to support those in those communities. Mr. Speaker, all our constituents will be watching on at the crisis and chaos that we're in, and we need to reflect on the fact that we are a week away from what is the intended day from leading the European Union and the responsibilities that we all have. Mr. Speaker, 6 days ago, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster said, in the absence of a deal, seeking such a short and critically one-off extension would be downright reckless. Downright reckless, Prime Minister. Does she agree with her de facto deputy that her actions this morning are downright reckless?
Before we get to that, because I know I have a tweet. Oh no, different one. But he did say it. But I don't think it actually matters. I noticed Owen Jones on Twitter with Corbyn, he was sucking his dick. It was fucking embarrassing.
As I have set out clearly for the House in a number of answers that I've now given on this question, I believe this House has a responsibility to deliver on the Brexit. People voted for Brexit, we have a responsibility to deliver. I recognise that the right honourable gentleman and his colleagues in the SNP have always taken the position they want to revoke Article 50 and not have Brexit. But the honourable gentleman shouts correct from a sedentary position. At least that's a firm position, which is different from the Leader of the Opposition, who has continually moved his position on this issue. But you
have to give them credit, I guess. I was right earlier. SNP are at least consistent in that position, as opposed to Labour, who have, up until very recently, been vague as the deal itself.
I also believe that nearly 3 years on from the vote having taken place to deliver on Brexit for the British people, it is time for this House to face that fact, to face the consequences of its decisions, and to deliver on Brexit for the British people.
Order! We can't have people shouting out in the middle of the exchanges. Order! I don't need any help from any member in dealing with these matters, with which I'm very well familiar. The Prime Minister.
Grateful to us. Had two. Yeah, he's had two. Mr. Peter.
No, sorry.
Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say to the Prime Minister that we need to reflect that her deal had the
touch
biggest
that
defeat
paper.
in parliamentary history. She brought it back, it had the 4th biggest defeat in parliamentary history. Her deal has failed. This House has voted against no deal. Once again, the Prime Minister is acting in her own self-interest, not in the interest of the whole of the UK. The Prime Minister has failed. This place has failed. And Scotland is watching.
Oh, he's touching it.
The only way forward now, Mr. Speaker, is to put the decision back to the people.
No.
Will the Prime Minister give the people a say in such a referendum? Mr. Speaker, the people of Scotland deserve a choice over their future. If Westminster fails, Scotland will act.
Lol. Your cute little devolved administration doesn't have the power to do shit. You silly, fat, paper-fiddling man, you belong on a register. A chalkboard register, because we can't trust you to sign a paper one. Anyway, I don't believe Scotland is watching. I'm sorry to hear that. I thought I pissed them all off by now. I think a second vote would be very, very insulting to those who believe in democracy. I'm not going to get Theresa May's answer because we don't need it. As far as I'm concerned, this is stupid. There should not be another referendum, and I know there were articles today, all day, saying that maybe there should be. We should revoke Article 50. There's a .gov petition to revoke Article 50 that was trending on Twitter, and I noticed somehow this petition that is trending, it's got a few signatures, but considering it's one of the highest trending things on Twitter, it only had 50,000 signatures at the time. That is not trend-worthy to me. That is very much, something's giving it a boost that it doesn't deserve. Now, I need to go record a video where I'm going to go complain about Live Nation copyright claiming my Desmond is Amazing video, where I rant for 20 minutes or 15 minutes, I think, about Desmond is Amazing, which either says they think they own my avatar or my voice, which they own shit. And talk about censorship in Australia. So, yeah. Thank you very much to all of you who have joined. Thank you very much to the very lovely person who donated earlier. And I hope you'll have a lovely evening.